Hello everyone, my name is T and this is my worksheet. So for part A, the details I choose are Aunt Lydia showed them porno film in chapter 20. So what's happened in the context is that Alfred recalled to the time they had to watch movies once a week as part of the training program at the Red Center. And for me, it's propaganda and manipulation in the form of palimpsest. Um, so the regime didn't want to show like the full reality of the time before because they know that it is happier and it is freer than it is right now with their regime. So instead of showing the time when the women are allowed to play or allowed to go outside and dress whatever they want, they picked the most immoral, filthy scenes in their view to show the handmaids. And so it's a form of like using minority to describe the majority of the past. So they just use like a minority side of the past society to describe the whole thing. So it is used as a way to gaslight the handmaids that they are blessed where they are right now because they don't have to suffer from such thing and they are protected from like the loss of man, and because like they're safe, so they should feel that they're blessed and they should like do their work as a handmaid to their children. And the second moment that I choose is Alfred feels slight pains in her belly and her breasts are heavy while doing the chants. So the context is the handmaids are forced to gather on the birthday and they are like forced into a room, and they are like taught the chants, which they use to identify the birth with dead body as a synchronized effort to support off Warren. So the theme is collective biological experience and the erasure of identity. So I think the regime successfully erases individuality and indoctrinates the women to function as a whole reproductive unit instead of like a human being with her own identity. They are like dehumanized into like childbearing vessels, and they all have to like collaborate with each other in a communal effort to bear the child, which is the common goal of the state. So a child is like the product of the communal effort, and then it became a state possession. Yeah. The third moment is the wife sits on the seat behind and above Janet on the birthing stool. Her skinny legs come down on either side of Janet is framed on either side of the chair as like the arm of the chair, and so that Janet is framed by her. So the context is as the birth reaches the most important moment, the wife is invited into the room with other wives. Like they haven't suffered. They don't have to suffer anything, but they just came when like the moment of like the child came into life, and the wife positions herself in like a symbolic position uh of higher status, and as if like she you know like it's ridiculous because she does that as if she delivers and bears the children herself. So the theme here is the dehumanization and body as a state possession. So the handmaid's body here is just like a vessel. It's just like an object. It's just like a way for the wife to have birth. So like Afward bears the child herself, but she's taken but her child is taken away from her, and the role of motherhood is performed by the wife, but not Afwarin. And so, and like the position of the chair, like Afwarin sits like below, and the wife sits like above, which like asserts the wife's status, and which shows that the handmaid is just like is under her control as a way for her to have birth, and that is like her child, but not like the handmaid's child. So the last moment is the wife lays down on the bed, and the baby is placed in her arms immediately after being washed. And the wife then looks down at the baby as a bouquet of flower as a tribute. So the context here is Janet suffers with pain afterwards, but she got her old baby stolen, and placed in the arms of the wife as she views it as as the wife views it as her accomplishment, which for me is ridiculous because she does nothing in suffering, and in like I think even like the other handmaids feel more pain than the wife themselves, because they have to sit in the room and feel the chanting and like the heat of the room and everything else. So the theme here is like the theft of motherhood and child as a victory. So the wife looks at a child like a tribute and shows that like having a child is like a transactional feat of like the people of status, like the wife, as she is congratulated by other wives. Like, is that her own like accomplishment? So on the other hand, like Janet, who suffers from real pain, gets the only reward of like not being an unwoman, and not being sent to the colonies, and then she will serve as like, and then she will feed the milk to the child as child, like because they believe in mother's milk, but she never gets to take care of her child, never, and she's not her mother, so she's like being deprived of motherhood, and then she's like transferred to other houses to perform her childbearing tasks. And part B, the commander's study and Hitler's mistress. So for me, what does it mean that the commander is the one breaking his old regime's rules? The commander asks Alfred to play Scrabble with him, even though he knows that it involves language and literacy, which is forbidden from like any women in the regime. So I think it shows his hypocrisy, as he is willing to break his own rules just for his own interest, because like he has no connection, and he longs for like the company of others, because his wife doesn't understand him, and he needs someone to be his friend to like satisfy his like his interest and his desire for like playing the game and entertainment. So, and I think this also shows in his saying that what's dangerous in the hands of the multitudes is safe enough for those beyond reproach, which he denotes that he's not bounded by any rules or regulations, and he can do whatever he wants, and he can manipulate and change the rules for his own interests. So, and it shows a lot about the power dynamics in Gilead, because rules are only applied to those of low status, while the elite has the privilege to have forbidden things, and they can do whatever they want with the rules as long as it benefits them. So I think he put Alfred in a precarious position. I think it's like a dilemma where she knows that she cannot reject him because of his power, but she faces a risk that can put her to death because like, he cannot intervene, and his wife is the one who like decides for like her old fate, and she can be like put to death, and she can be sent to the colonies if she's caught. So it's like really risky and dangerous for her, and she's not given the ability to choose, because like either way she's like, yeah, because like either way is not good for her. Rather, she's just like a whim used to satisfy his interests, and she has to do it for the sake of her life. And why does Alfred discuss the interview of Hitler's mistress? I think Alfred discusses the interview of Hitler's mistress to process her corresponding intimacy to the commander, as she knows that she has to give in to his personal interest in order to survive, which is the same as the mistress to Hitler. Like, yeah, so she's tried to rationalize her choice. I think because she understands that she has no other choice. And I think it's also a reminder to herself that it is really risky, because the mistress eventually like suicides, and she realized that how much risk she's put herself into. Not put herself into, but like she's forced to put herself into. So there are lots of parallels in this relationship. I think the most like striking one is that she has to find ways to humanize the commanders and convince herself of his goodness. So she find that his actions are like sheepish, like he's like just like a big child. He's shy, and he's polite. He has like some small smiles, that he's like is a good person. Yeah, so it has like the impression that he's like a miserable person, and that he just wants to have some friends, someone to accompany, someone to be with him, and to make him less lonely. So just like the mistress, it like it just gives the impression that he's a normal person, even though he treats her like a pet in the zoo or a kid to satisfy his wants. Just like the mistress, like she tries to pretend that she doesn't know anything about Hitler, and she tries to rationalize his normalcy as a human being. I think it's like a coping mechanism, because she knows that she has to give in, and she has to cooperate with him in order to survive. And the code indicates the temptation to create a human-like image of a monstrous individual. By creating a mental blindness in their cruelty, they try to ignore their power and their privilege and their cruelty towards others and their suffering. Instead, they projecting a big child image in them to try to see that they are like an normal human being. And I think that is fragile, because it can see that the mistress eventually kills herself. So I think it's dangerous to rationalize these relationships. And why would a fashion magazine is so powerful to Alfred? I think a fashion magazine is so powerful to Alfred because it reminds her of individuality, the idea of transformation, like she can update her self-image, and she can have self-growth, and the ability to act silly, to act frivolous sometimes, which is oppressed and completely deprived under the regime of Gilead, because women are molded into an accepted image and role of a childbearing vessel or a two-leg worm, and they don't have the ability to reinvent themselves, because cannot change. If they change, they cannot survive in like that system. And so in the magazine, you can see that women cope with pain and overcome them as they reinvent themselves. But in Gilead, they cannot do that. So there's no promise in the future for them. And also, like, they don't have the freedom to move with their body. They cannot stride or fling their arms freely or plant their feet squarely on the ground like people on the magazine, but they are forced to look down with reserved arms all the time. And part D. So what does the moment of like Aflin speaks to Alfred about like whether or not God listens, means to Alfred and the reader's understanding of Gilead power. So for Alfred, I think this is a spring of hope, because before that, Afghan for her is a spy that can report her anytime. And not just Alfred, but like anyone else that she meets, because like, and she feels lonely because of that, all the people she know that can rebel with her, that can like understand her, like that is good for her, like Luke, Moira, or her mother, they are gone. And with Aflin, she knows that solidarity in people and the ability to trust somebody and not fear of being reported, and also like the promise of an organization of rebellion is still possible and they're real. So the use of we and us highlights this, because she no longer like feels like lonely anymore. And to the reader, I think Gilead imposes its power through suspicion and trust issue, because it invents like the reporting and rewarding mechanism as a way to strip off trust between people, because people cannot expose their vulnerability and desire to protest in front of others, because they fear of being caught by like reporting. So it prevents all types of mass rebellion, since people are not willing to trust other. But it also gives hope to the reader themselves, because any oppression is faced with resistance, and a seemingly perfect system always have small cracks, although those cracks are tactfully balanced by Atwood as she showed the emergence of the black van. It still reminds that the regime's way of dominance and oppression is still scary and effective. So the theme I choose is rituals and ceremony and birthdays. So like the regime used rituals as a way to indoctrinate all the women, because you can see that all the handmaids are forced into a room, and which Atwood describes as a matrix. And then like the room then becomes a giant womb where everyone participates in the bearing of the child and suffering from a collective biological experience. So the Todd chants at the Red Center, as I said before, like successfully indoctrinates the idea that the handmaids are like just childbearing two-leg wombs with no individuality, but as a whole reproductive unit that is under the state's possession and work for a common goal is to bear a child for the state. And so they try to have the rituals as a way to consolidate that indoctrination of them. And the positions of the wife on the birthing stool, like above and behind the handmaids, and how she framed herself, she framed the handmaids as a way of like dominance. The arrival of the wives after that to congratulate her after like suffering no pain, and the ritual of her lying on the bed with a child on her arm, which is like taken away from the handmaid who is suffering from the pain after her labor, is a way to like assert their ranking and their status, because like eventually the mother is still the wife. She has the right to name the child and see it as her accomplishment. And one thing that surprised me in this section is how ridiculous the birthday and all the ritual is. I mean, based on the image of the birthing stool, how Janen is shielded and surrounded by the handmaids for her to not see the image of her child is taken, its name, and is placed on the wife's hand. And I think it is like really shocking to see that. It is kind of disturbing for me to read that whole chapter 2. And one question is that what is Aflin's organization of rebellion? Like, what does that organization do to rebel, and is that gonna be successful? And also Alfred's like choice to rebel herself. Are she gonna join that? I believe no, but what are her ways of rebellion, and Afghan's and Alfred's relationship moving forward? Thank you.